Okay, well, welcome everyone to tonight's presentation. The presentation for this evening is potentially dangerous and ineffective exercises explained. I've had an interest in this from a lot of different perspectives over the years. I've been a competitive bodybuilder, I'm a physiotherapist, so I look at exercises to a certain extent a lot differently now than I used to. And if it makes you feel any better, almost every exercise I talk about tonight that is potentially dangerous, I've at some stage done in my history. So don't feel bad if you're still doing them now. The problem is if you know a bit of information and still do it, then it becomes an issue for us. Now tonight's presentation, there's kind of 5 different things I'm going to go through. I'm going to talk about how firstly you can identify a potentially dangerous exercise or an ineffective exercise. What things will make in your mind, will make you think, gee, doesn't quite sit right with me. When I see an exercise, and some people say to me, Paul, what do you think of this exercise? And sometimes you look at an exercise and you think, something just not quite right about it from what I know about physiology. So I'll show you some things you can work on that will give you those clues. I'll then go through a list of what I think are potentially dangerous exercises, ones that I think have fundamental flaws in them. I'll give you then a list of what I think are ineffective exercises, ones that I just think are a waste of time. They just aren't worth the time spent doing them. You have better alternatives. And I'll always give you an alternative tonight of what is a better exercise. So I'm always very aware of taking things away from people. You take all these great exercises that they've been doing for years and don't replace it with something, they get a little bit unhappy with you. So I'll try and give you an alternative all the time. I'll then give you a list of what I think are tragedies. A tragedy from my perspective, an exercise that is a sensationally productive exercise, but there's just something about it that is a little bit on the dangerous side, which is why I think it's a tragedy, which is some of the great exercise of the past, but there's a couple of flaws that we need to be aware of. And finally, I'll give you some exercises that I think are more technique dependent. Great exercises, but they're dependent on how good or how experienced the person is or how good their instruction is. That's kind of the brief of the exercise I'm going to go through tonight. Okay? So firstly, how to pick a dangerous or ineffective exercise. Can you see the fundamental problem with that exercise? So we've got the line of the basic load is at 90 degrees to the long axis of the bone. You've got the same issue with front raises. If I do a front raise, can you see I've got the load here going straight down that way. It's at 90 degrees to the long axis of the bone involved. Okay, look for that when you look at potentially dangerous exercises. Where's the load in relation to the long axis of the bone? A lot of people like benching to the neck. It does give you a bigger stretch across the pec, but it abducts you even further and takes you back even further to an unstable position. Compare there to about mid-sternum, it unloads your shoulder quite a lot. So high bar bench press, you see a lot of people with problems with their AC joints and they get very unstable shoulders from it. It's a reasonably uncomfortable position to be in. You often see them lead with their heads. They get up to here and their head goes forward first and they get upper trap problems as well. So high bar bench press is a problem. Some people bench press exceptionally wide. Now, as Carlos, probably even wider than that, you'll see some people go. If Carlos bench presses in that position, he comes down. Can you see at no time has his radius made a perpendicular position with the ground? So we talked about getting force through the long axis of the bones. Can you see that's not going to do that? He's going to have shearing forces through his elbows because it's pushing his elbows out to the side. Ideally, he needs to bring his hands closer so that at least he can push straight through the long axis of his radius when he's benching. Okay, fundamental problem with the exercise. Once I lock my knees back, it's pretty hard for me to turn my gluteals on. By flexing your knees, your quads contract, which tighten up and put pressure on your ITB, iliotibial band, which let your gluteals stabilise your pelvis. Once you lock them back, you get nothing. You get no support around your sacroiliac joints from that. So by bending your knees, at least take some of the pressure off your lower back. Thumb width apart, up under the chin, which is still a reasonably common technique and common way people do upright row. The fundamental problem with the upright row done that way is its abduction in internal rotation. It's that impingement position we talked about before. If I want to test if you've got impingement, I'd put you in that position. So it's going to keep jamming your rotator cuff underneath your acromion. If you've got a few positional problems or if you've got a bit of a swelling of the tendon, have a predisposition for shoulder problems, you will end up with a problem in your rotator cuff. Simply doing the exercise. How do you stop it? Still do the exercise, but take a wider grip. So it's a wider grip version, and you don't come as high. It's about maybe mid-sternum as the highest amount you go. If you have a person who's hypermobile, say they're really unstable, they're a flexible person, They haven't exercised for a while. They've got a history in ballet, dance, etc. They come in, they've got clicky, clunky joints. They've dislocated something in the past. These are the person who you don't want to be doing flies and front raises. You don't want them out wide. You want them in tight. You want rows and presses, things where they're constricted because they haven't got the stability of their joint to support those loads and that length of lever. Be smart in your program design, guys.